So me and Garrett did the poem at a Cavalry near the Acre by Wilfred Owen. Garrett, what is this poem about?
Emma, this poem is about the overall meaning of it. Wilfred Owen was in the army during during World War One. He fought on the side of the British, and he wrote about all of his experiences and everything everything that he came across during the war, and wrote poems about him. Unfortunately, only lived to the age of 25, and died early. But got quite a few poems out, and my poem was at Cavalry near the Ancre, and he's very biblical. He relates all of his experiences to Bible stories and different things that happen in the Bible, and mine overall is about Jesus being crucified on the cross, and he relates it to his time in the Ancre, which is a place in France, a river in France, and the Calvary is a statue of crucified Christ that was depicted in that area. In the first stanza, he points out that at the very beginning he says no one ever is in the area of the in between where no man ever goes, no man's land, and each force was on each side of where the shell roads part, and it goes straight into the biblical reference, starting the reference with Jesus Christ and saying that he too lost a limb in this war, relating this war back to when he was crucified and fighting for what he believed in. And his disciples had a part. So his disciples, the 12 disciples that were with him through everything, were really afraid at this point that he was going to be killed and didn't want a part of it. And so Wilfred Owen relates the soldiers in World War I and puts them in the biblical story and says that the soldiers bear with him. So the soldiers are guarding his statue, the Cavalry.
I kind of find it interesting that the soldiers are the ones with him when you would think the disciples were.
Right.
I also thought that this went back to the Bible where the disciples, he told the disciples to disperse and tell all of his stories. And this kind of relates when he was on the cross and the disciples kind of tried to go out maybe to other countries in Europe and try to say like how Germany was affecting them and how World War I is devastating the European countries.
Right. I hear where you're coming from, and it's as the poem progresses, he goes into saying that that all the soldiers were flesh marked by the beast, and the beast being Germany. Germany was the opponent against the British at this time, and flesh marked nearly means minor wounds that the soldiers had from fighting in the battle, and now they were just trying to protect the statue of Christ, relating biblically to when he was up on the cross.
I also find it interesting that they said like flesh marks because I know like during like in the book of Revelations they say like in the end of times, because a lot of people at this time thought like World War I was going to be like the end of the world because a war at this magnitude was never had before, and so I thought like the use of also they mentioned the beast in Germany and like the devil, so you would think like towards the end of the world where people were marked with 666, so I kind of got that imagery from that also.
Right. And along with that, towards the third stanza, the third and final stanza, I think some people did see maybe the end of the world coming, including Wilfred Owen and all the other soldiers who were protecting the Cavalry. And in the last stanza, it says, "The scribes on all the people shove and ball alliance or allegiance to the state." And the state most nearly meaning a religious state. The scribes. What do you? the scribes.
I kind of found it interesting. Like, I thought the scribes, like, like how back then they always did, like, the Bibles, like, people hand wrote the Bibles. And let me see what it says about the scribes. Doesn't it say, the scribes on all the people shove and ball allegiance to the state? I think it's really interesting to think of, like, the religious state, because I never thought of it like that. I think that's a cool interpretation, because he does bring up religion and how that's kind of like a state of being at the time. I kind of thought of it also kind of like the state, like Germany, the state. Like, so instead of, like, the scribes being towards God, they were turning towards the state, and they were shoving people and balling allegiance to a state instead of God. So this
people to be more
allegiant to the state than God.
Germany instead of the religious state of sacrificing themselves to Jesus.
Yeah, which is also kind of cool, because when you think about it, a lot of, like, the devil imagery and, like, the end of times is coming here, and then that's kind of showing how, like, even it says the priests were filled with pride and they were flesh marked. When you wouldn't think a priest would have to go through that, and they would be the opposite. So maybe this could be, like, kind of almost like the end of religion in World War I, which is pretty interesting with that. And I think, like, religion definitely plays a huge part in this. And also, like, I don't know if you wanted to talk about, like, like the last line when it talks about, it ends with that word hate.
Yes, the last line is a Bible verse out of the Bible. A little rephrase in the poem, but they who love the greater love lay down their life, they do not hate. And this Bible verse is John 15, verse 13. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. So
I think that it's kind of a nice spin on it, because the whole time he talks about how, like, the loss of religion, but then, like you said, like, the state of religion also comes back towards the end of the poem, because it's saying how instead of, like, hating members like Germany and other people in the war, which would again cause another war, it's kind of interesting that instead you should love them and not hate them. So it kind of ends on a positive note based on religion, which I think Wilfred Owen was trying to aim for.
Right, and if you think of it the way I did, the state being the religious state, people that ball their allegiance to the state, they're sacrificing themselves to Christ, and they're giving their lives over to Christ, and they're loving Him, and He's loving them, and He's giving them the greater love for laying down their life, and they will not hate Him for that. They will always be loved.
And they discovered this at the Cavalry, which is where the title comes into play also. So I just found, the religion used in here is definitely very interesting.
Very strong.
So, woo!